So yeah,
Right here. Say hi.
There. That one.
Say hi. Hello, everybody. We are going live. Actually, there's one technical issue, so forgive me. We're going to fix this one technical issue, but let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am here once again with Melanie Phillips, the one and only, who I very much enjoy hearing her feedback. So let's get at it. How are you, Melanie?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
All right. Big issue that's taking up the airspace, media headlines in America. We're talking about the southern border. We're talking about the issue of the children being separated and being put in detention centers. Help us make some order out of all the information that's coming out here, because for many of us, it sounds like a big political mudslinging based on the backs of these children.
It's very unpleasant. The children are being used and manipulated to make political points. And it's a very distressing situation all round. To start with, it is clearly a very difficult and unsatisfactory and distressing situation when children are placed in this situation where they are separated from their families.
Right.
I don't think there's anybody who disagrees with that.
Right.
Now, President Trump is being blamed for separating these children. And this is unfair because he has inherited a policy that's been going on for years.
Right.
Now, you could say that he should have done something about it already. And I think that's a perfectly fair criticism. Or to be more precise, Congress should have done something about it already. The situation is perfectly clear. There is a law. There is immigration law. The people coming across the border, the people in question coming across the border, are behaving illegally. They are illegal immigrants. They are not coming through in the required fashion.
Right.
The law requires them to be brought to account, to be arrested, and to be dealt with under the criminal law. That law has not been used for many years, and as a result, an incentive has grown up because the law. One of the reasons why the law hasn't been used is that the Democratic administration actually wanted lots of immigrants to come in and didn't think it was appropriate or right to enforce the law against illegal immigration. They turned a blind eye. You had in America this phenomenon of sanctuary cities, where it became a thing on the Democratic side that people should have sanctuary from the law. So that was one very important aspect as to why the Democrats encouraged illegal immigration. And the second thing was that they were genuinely caught by the genuine problem, that if people come with their children, the law in America, enforced by the courts, whether it's actually written in the law or whether it's the result of court judgments, I'm not quite sure, but it's certainly the law in America means you cannot lock up children in detention. It's inhumane. You have to deal with them in some other way. You can't put them in prison with their parents. Because you can't put children in prison for a long period of time or even for a short period of time. And that's considered a humane attitude. And the problem is when you get a lot of people coming with their children, and what the Democrats did was just turn a blind eye and say, well, we can't lock them up, we don't want to lock them up. And so they all came pouring in. And what's more, it became an incentive that if you came with your children, you'll be let in. So this is the situation that Trump inherited. Very difficult situation. He wanted to enforce the law against illegal immigration. That was one of the things he ran for president on. That is part of his bargain with the American people. The American public voted for him in large numbers, partly because they wanted an end to illegal immigration. They wanted the law of the land enforced. So a couple of months ago, he started to enforce the law of the land.
It's zero tolerance, they called it.
Okay, as a result of which, a lot of children have been caught up in this problem. Now, this is where the really difficult thing starts, because one could say that this shouldn't have happened. Trump and or Congress should have sorted this situation before they started to enforce the law in order to avoid this problem with the children. And I think, personally, that's what they should have done. However, they didn't do it, so we are where we are. And what's happening is he is being accused of separating these children and being cruel and inhumane. Now, the first thing to say is He's being accused of separating 2,000 plus children. There aren't 2,000 plus children, there are 12,000 plus children, 10,000 of whom were sent across the border with nobody at all. So it's their parents who have abused those children and have sent those children across the border. And from the border patrol people who've been interviewed, we can hear that the situation that those parents have put their children in is appalling. They are exposed to appalling risks. I've watched a video of a border patrolman saying they've been dealing with, for example, very young children, young girls, who have been equipped by their parents with contraceptive pills because their parents know that the little girls are going to be raped en route. A 9-year-old boy who dropped dead of heat stroke in front of the border patrol people, unaccompanied by his parents. These children are exposed to the most appalling risks and ill treatment by the time they get to the border patrol. The children who've come with their parents, some of them are not their parents at all, some of them are other family members and so on. Basically, the children are being used as human shields. And the children are being used as human shields also, or as weapons, in the assault upon President Trump. Now, President Trump's language has been criticised. In the wake of this tremendous furore, in the course of which he was persuaded, I think in political terms, because you had all these crying children being broadcast. So this, of course, is very emotional, and people get very, very upset. I'm upset hearing these crying children. The first thing to say is, we have no idea whether these recordings are true or not. We have no idea why these children are crying. Time magazine has been caught out in a big lie. They put a collage as their cover picture of President Trump looking at a crying child, a crying migrant child. Now, this crying migrant child was indeed a migrant child, was indeed at the border, was indeed crying. The implication is that the child was crying piteously because the child had been separated by the cruel Trump administration from its parents at the border. The father in Mexico, or whatever he is, not in Mexico, in one of the Latin American countries, was interviewed. And the father said the child wasn't separated at all. The child was just crying. The child was with his mother all the time. The mother and child went across the border. The mother was arrested or detained. The mother was never separated from her child at any time. And this crying child, that image of that particular child has apparently not just gone viral, but has been used to raise something like $18 million for a charity involved in dealing with all this situation. I mean, this is madness. So you have the crying children placing this amazing pressure upon President Trump. The Republicans jumping up and down saying, we can't stand this, we can't take this. So he signed an executive order to deal with it. Whether that will deal with it, we don't know. But put that to one side. He was clearly absolutely furious about what was going on. And he then, in Trumpian form, unleashed some Trumpian language. And he said, worse the effect of the Democrats want to, and he used the word infest. He said the Democrats want to infest America with illegal immigrants. Now, whatever you think about the Democrats' policy about illegal immigration, and really I don't think very much of it at all, you do not use the word infest when it comes to people. You do not use the word infest. Infest means vermin. And he should not have used that word. But this is Trump. He uses language very loosely, right, and without thinking. And he shouldn't do that. He's the President of the United States. So I disapprove of that language. So now you have people jumping up and down using this verbiage that he used to prove that he is a kind of fascist and monster, ignoring the fact that even though, as I say, I disapprove completely of this word infest, but the language being used about President Trump and about the Republican Party in Congress and about Kirsten Nielsen, who is the Homeland Security official who's been involved in trying to uphold the law against illegal immigration. That language is appalling. You've had calls for there was a tweet put out by Peter Fonda, and as far as I know, he has not been disciplined by Twitter, saying that Baron Trump, the son of the president, should be placed in a cage with ISIS paedophiles, and effectively, Baron should be raped by paedophiles, and also that Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security official, who he described in terms far too vulgar for me to mention to you,
right.
But he said she should be stripped naked and flayed, whipped in Lafayette Square. I mean, this is deranged. A man has been arrested for threatening to murder the son of a Republican congressman because he's so upset about the crying children. And in parallel, and this is even greater distress, a number of Jewish people, rabbis, progressive rabbis, so-called progressive rabbis in Britain, and so-called progressive Jewish journalists in Britain, have started to compare the separation of the children at the Mexican border with the Holocaust.
Right.
This is obscene. This is obscene. There was an American lawmaker who used this analogy.
The lawmaker, or are you talking about General Hayden, who I think, or someone who was the past head of
was
NSA?
It General Hayden? Yes, right.
Past head of the
and
NSA.
he got jumped on.
He used the picture of Auschwitz and his tweets comparing
and
it to
people
Auschwitz.
were horrified by this.
Right.
And now you've got Jewish people who are not going that far, but they're saying that, the dehumanization of immigrants at the border, and by Trump's language and by what Trump is doing, is the prelude to what we've seen in the past in Nazi Europe. And this, in my view, is completely obscene. It's almost Holocaust denial. It is denigrating what happened at the Holocaust.
Right.
I mean, even if you think that this policy is completely inhumane, even if you unfairly blame President Trump for the whole policy, even if you think it's without any justification whatsoever, I mean, to compare it to genocide is appalling,
right.
Especially given what the Americans are doing in a ham-fisted way is trying to uphold the law. And when it comes to the language, as I've said, infest, he shouldn't have said that. But no one is criticizing the French president, Emmanuel Macron, who, faced with the situation in Italy, where the Italian populist government has been turning away illegal immigrants in large number, and this has caused horror around the progressive intelligentsia in Europe, and horror in the Jewish community as well, which thinks that all these populists are basically fascists and Nazis. Emmanuel Macron in France has said that people like the Italian populist government and other similar administrations in Europe, which are trying to prevent mass immigration across their borders, they are like it's like leprosy.
Oh, Macron's just said that?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
He's called them lepers. He says it's leprosy. He has called them a disease. A disease.
The populists.
Yes. He has dehumanized all those people and their voters. He's called them a disease.
It's like Hillary Clinton saying deplorables, anyone who
was a Trump supporter. So if you're saying quite rightly President Trump should never use the word infest about people, whatever they're doing, and I agree with that.
So where's the sign?
Where is the people saying Macron should have? He's calling people. He's saying it's leprosy, that all these millions of people voting to enforce their
immigration laws.
Their immigration laws. It's leprosy. I mean, what's going on here? It's a hysteria, and it's being used. This whole thing is being used, and the children are being used as I say, human shields. But they're being. It's not quite the right analogy. I think that the would-be illegal immigrants are using their children as human shields.
Correct.
But the people who are using them against Trump in this horrible way, and against all the voters who voted for Trump and voted for these populist parties, they're using these children very cynically as kind of political cannon fodder. And this analogy that's being drawn with the Holocaust takes it into a different sphere altogether.
Right.
Because, first of all, you cannot possibly compare even the most cack-handed attempt to enforce the law of a democratic country to protect its borders from illegal immigrants. You cannot possibly compare that to genocide. It's obscene to do so. And for Jews to be doing it, I mean, it just shows the extent of Trump derangement syndrome, when you've got Jews who've so completely lost the plot that they are making this disgusting analogy. The whole thing is so upsetting.
Right.
The whole subject is upsetting. The way it's being used is upsetting, and what it's unleashed.
Right.
And what it's unleashed is this hatred and this irrationality that now courses through the West. And where you're going with this, that's what really does frighten me. It's this loss of reason, loss of proportion, loss of what the words conscience actually means, loss of what the words truth and evidence actually means, loss of reason, loss of proportion. This is what really is frightening me.
Right. Listen, I actually want to use this to connect with part of what your basic line of thinking is through most of your writings and your books as well. Again, we're talking about the issue of the southern border and the children who are placed in detention centers. And the sad thing is the discourse. I mean, it's wonderful. Everyone should be caring about these children. Yes, it's a horrible situation.
They're not caring about the children at all.
Exactly. It's being used as a political tool instead of actually caring about the children. Because, as you said before, the numbers being thrown about 2,000 children who are separated from their parents, but being ignored the 10,000 additional children who are being sent without parents, who are being used as the human
shield. And who are
shields.
experiencing this appalling abuse en route. No one cares about that.
Correct. Nothing's being talked about. That issue, the issue about their being abused, whether by drug smugglers, by their own parents, whoever, and that it's our border patrol, the American Border Patrol, that it has to deal with a hard situation. Okay, how do we deal with this hard situation to care about these children the best? But that's not the discussion. It's just anti-Trump, which he might be good, he might be bad, it might be perfect, now it might be perfect, but it's a hard situation. And again, what I'm trying to get at is the bottom line of how it fits in with your philosophy or outlook of the destruction of Western culture, per se.
Well, yes. I think it's an example of everything I've written for the last 25, 30 years. I mean, what this great immigration fight is all about, to leave Trump out of it for the moment, let's broaden it to all the attempts by the countries of Europe to enforce their borders and so on. And it's two worldviews completely colliding. One worldview says that we value our national cultures, we value Western culture, we value our national democracies, which enable us to enshrine our Western values in our own laws, and for which we need to have a sense of nationhood, and we're entitled to a sense of nationhood. And in order to have a sense of nationhood and a sense of national identity, we have to be able to set our immigration policies so that we can preserve our culture. That doesn't mean that you keep out all immigrants. It just means that you manage immigration to a manageable level. And we are entitled, and we must, police our borders, both to preserve our national identity, but also from the point of view of security, and to uphold the law. And these are things which are basic to Western democratic tradition. The rule of law, the fact that you have a Western national identity, and all of that. So that's on one side. And over the last 20, 30 years, for longer, I think, since the Second World War, that view has been under existential assault from the progressive side of politics, which basically says that the Western nation state is the cause of all the ills of the world, that any attempt to uphold a discrete Western national identity is inherently racist and xenophobic and cannot be allowed to stand, that the only model in the world must be the kind of brotherhood of man. You dissolve national boundaries, you have open borders, you don't have discrete cultures, and then you have everybody living in harmony together, and you end prejudice and war. That view has been the driving, galvanizing force behind the whole progressive agenda over, I would say, more than half a century. And it's taken root in everything to do with a culture and society. The education system turned from being the transmission of Western identity into teaching children that Western culture was worse than awful. The traditional family was destroyed. The traditional family is the best way of ensuring that the next generation has the emotional resilience to continue a culture. That went down the chute. Multiculturalism came in. You weren't allowed to say anything to uphold Western culture as being superior to any other, and all of that. And this great fight over immigration in Europe and in America has come about because the people who voted for Trump, the people who voted for all these populist parties, have got to the point where they're seeing that if this doesn't stop, then the things that they hold dear, the rule of law, the ability to maintain their own national identity and all the rest of it, are just going down the tubes. And that's why they voted for Trump. That's why they voted for all these populist parties. And that's the struggle.
Right.
That's the struggle. And broadly, that's what we're seeing, this tremendous fight by the so-called progressive intelligentsia on the left side of politics to uphold their worldview, which is fundamentally anti-democratic, fundamentally anti-West, fundamentally nihilistic and anti the rule of law, fundamentally will always support the power, the exercise of power by the strong over the weak. And that's what they're all about. They may think that they're standing for progress and conscience and reason, but they are not. And in the course of their determination to uphold this, they are now coming out the whole time as bullies of the most appalling kind, literally threatening murder, rape, and mayhem in order to get their way. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing the really ugly face now coming out. And this is a culture war.
Right.
We are living through a culture war, and it's now reaching a boiling point in both America and Europe.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much for your insight on that issue, which I'm sure it's not going to be going away anytime soon. Let's go next issue. Let's jump to the Middle East quickly. President Trump has his ultimate deal for Middle East peace. And his envoys, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and his envoy Jason Greenblatt, are busy jumping around the Middle East, meeting all these different Middle East leaders. I think yesterday they met Netanyahu. The one Middle East leader they are not meeting is Mahmoud Abbas, who doesn't want to meet them. Any insight on what's going on right now?
I have no insight into what's going on. I'm reading what we're all reading, which isn't telling us very much at all. Clearly, something is afoot. Clearly, President Trump is on record as saying, this is the deal of deals, and he would love to pull this off. There's only one thing that's ever stopped peace in the Middle East between Israel and its Arab neighbours, and that's its Arab neighbours.
Right.
And so now we've reached a situation which is very interesting, because now there's a split among the Arab neighbours. On the one hand, you have I think a very significant movement in the right direction among the Gulf states, in Egypt in particular, and even in Saudi Arabia, what we understand, in which they've got other things to worry about than the Palestinians, and they're not interested anymore. And so then they're interested in living with Israel. They may not like it, but put that to one side. They're prepared to be pragmatic in the interests of defeating Iran, in the interests, in the case of Saudi Arabia, of in ensuring there continues to be a Saudi Arabia and it's not swept aside by modernity and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you have the Palestinian Arabs, who are fighting the last century's war and will not stop, and they will never stop. They will never stop. So this is why Mahmoud Abbas is not meeting President Trump's son-in-law and envoy, because President Trump has already been holding the Palestinian Arabs' feet to the fire and has been saying, you've got away with this for so long, you've been, basically blackmailing us for so long, it's over. We're not going to give you anything anymore. And hysteria has descended. So the question is, what is this great peace plan? We are led to believe that this is a deal which is going to kind of, just transform everything. It's not a peace deal like we've known before.
Right.
So what's it going to come up with? I haven't got the faintest idea. But if it's going to have any chance of succeeding, then it has to it has to answer a different question from the one that's usually posed. The question that's always been posed ever since I can remember is, how do you divide up the land?
Right.
The peace process has always been, how do you divide up the land?
Right.
And the argument has been between the people on the one hand who say, well, there's got to be a two-state solution, and you've got to divide up the land between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The Palestinians are going to have this and that, and the Israelis should have this and that, and then everyone can live together. Right. And on the other hand, you have people saying, no, you can't divide up the land. It's our land as Jews. We're entitled to the whole of it, and Judea and Samaria must be ours in perpetuity, and that's the end of it. Both of these points of view, opposed as they are, in my view, completely beside the point. The issue is not how do we divide the land. The issue is not what should the land look like when peace comes. The issue is, how are we going to stop the Palestinian Arabs from trying to commit a genocidal, existential assault upon the State of Israel? That's the issue. Everything else is secondary. How do you defeat them? How do you make them stop waging war through terror, through everything else that they're waging? And that's the question that the Trump administration, or anyone who wants to end this conflict, has to answer. Now, it's possible that you can answer it by acknowledging that's the question. Then you answer it by, if you've got everybody else on side, if everybody agrees that we're not having the Palestinian Arabs dictating us anymore. So then you say, right, so it's over. So nobody gives them any money, no one gives them any diplomatic status, and their land is divided for them. Their land is divided for them. You can see, Egypt will take over Gaza, Jordan will be in a confederation with the West Bank. Who knows?
Right.
There are many ways of spinning that particular camp.
Exactly.
But the issue has to be that the question to be answered has to be the right question.
Right.
It's been the wrong question hitherto.
Right.
Now, are they going to do that? I've got the faintest idea. I really don't know. Are they going to continue to be, as it were, stymied or held hostage, as it were, by the Palestinian Arabs? You've got, they are breathing, fire and brimstone. Abbas is saying he won't see them. So in the past, that's been like the end of it. Oh, well, so, they're not playing, so that's over now, so we've got to think again. Okay, that's where we got to in the past.
Right.
And then everybody blames Israel, but that's another matter.
Right.
So is the Trump administration going to do that again? Or is it going to do something completely different? In which case, what is it? I'm agog.
Right.
We're all agog.
Right. All right, well, they're here now. Let's see what happens. So they're here. Let's go on to the final topic of the day. Someone who is coming tonight, I think, tonight or tomorrow. Prince William.
Poor old Prince William. I do feel for him, I must say.
Really? Why?
Well, first of all, I feel for both of these boys. They're boys, they're men. But,
William and Harry?
Yeah, I mean, I say boys because we all in Britain...
You grew up with them as kids.
No, but we have the picture imprinted on our minds is the picture of the two children following their mother's coffin.
I knew you were going to say that.
Unbearable. Unbearable. And both of these men are afflicted and will be afflicted possibly forever by what happened to them as children. Their parents, the disintegration of their parents' marriage and all that followed. And I feel for both of them, I must say. And William seems to me the more vulnerable.
Really?
Prince Harry is said to be, the more combustible and the one that they were always much more concerned about because he is the wild card. He is a much wilder personality, and William is much more kind of constrained and solid and inward. So it's kind of less of a problem. But I don't know. I'm being an amateur psychologist here, but Prince William looks so unhappy. He quite clearly doesn't want any of this. He doesn't want the role that he is inheriting.
He just wants to go under his covers and stay in bed with his wife.
He wants a nice life with his nice wife and his nice children and his nice house, and he wants an ordinary, quiet, anonymous life in which he can do things he likes doing. He can no longer be what he was. He was a helicopter rescue pilot. That's stopped. Now he has to take on official responsibility.
Yeah, at that point he was happy because he was out on his own, leading his own individual life.
Anyway, be that as it may, he's coming. He's coming this evening. And he's coming, in a cloud of controversy because of we talked about this last week,
right?
The itinerary put out by his office in Kensington Palace, which will have been provided, the relevant wording will be provided by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which has him visiting Jordan and visiting Israel. But then he visits something that the Foreign Office calls the occupied Palestinian territories. And as if that's not bad enough, because in my view there is no such thing as the Palestinian territories and no such thing as the occupation, but that's another matter. Which
is key, and you have to look up what Melanie writes about that to understand that, because it's very important.
I've put it on my website, MelaniePhillips.com,
yes.
great length. But within that offensive and wrong nomenclature, occupied Palestinian territories, he is going to be looking at, if not going to, the Western Wall and Temple Mount. And the idea that, the holiest sites in Judaism are actually Palestinian territory which Israel is illegally occupying, which is the British position, is wrong in law, profoundly offensive, and says something about the mindset of the British official class, which is very disturbing. So the trouble is, Prince William is supposed to be coming here on an apolitical visit. And the British ambassador to Israel has been gallantly saying this in the wake of this controversy that's blown up. No, he's completely apolitical. He's only going to do things which are completely apolitical. He's going to be visiting worthy projects. And he will be visiting worthy projects. And the idea is that it's apolitical because, it will be embodying, goodwill between the two countries, Britain and Israel, and that's all. Except that in Israel, in the Middle East, nothing is apolitical.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
And especially with this kind of cloud that's overcoming that he's coming under because of the way in which his visit has been described. So it will be a very interesting thing to see where he goes. We know broadly where he's going in Jordan. We know broadly where he's going in Israel. But where he goes after that, what sites he will visit, and with whom. Who is going to be telling him about the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, and all the rest of it?
Interesting.
Who's going to be accompanying him?
Every step is under a microscope.
It's completely political. So I feel for him. He's in a minefield, and the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office has not only pushed him into a minefield, but has basically tossed him a mine and said, you explode it. You explode it in their faces.
So let me ask you this. It's just interesting because it's been 70 years since the establishment of Israel. This is the first official royal visit. Why now? Do we have any understanding? And why Prince William, especially since this is not a role that he wants, as you're explaining?
Yes.
To be under the microscope.
There is a lot of ignorant talk about Prince William's visit, and on the back of Prince William's visit, about the fact the royal family has never been here. A lot of commentators who should know better saying, the royal family has always shown its contempt or disdain or hatred or prejudice against the State of Israel. Completely untrue. Completely untrue. These people writing mainly from America, or from an American perspective, sorry to insult your old country, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. The British royal family does nothing official on their own bat. We have no idea what they think about the State of Israel or anywhere. They don't have a view. They only come on official visits where the British government wants them to come. And the only reason they've never made an official visit to the State of Israel is because the British Foreign Office has never wanted them to come, because the British Foreign Office has always been frightened, I think, of the Arab response to what would be seen, quite rightly, as an imprimatur of approval of the State of Israel. In general, the fact that it exists.
Right.
And the Foreign Office was always terrified of this. So, that's the only reason they never come. Now, Prince William has been chosen because he's the kind of the least, he's the least, he's the most apolitical you can get, really, without being insulting. So if you sent, the Queen, it would be a sort of fairly major statement. That's, too big. Prince Charles also. Prince William is like, he's young, everyone's interested in Prince William, and, he'll do stuff with young people, and so it'll be apolitical. It's that. It's a sort of youth thing, bridges an awkward gap.
It's like making a check mark. It's like we're finally doing it, but it's a...
It's a check mark, but it's not sort of too big a check mark. The question you ask is an interesting one, and I can't answer it. Why now? Why now? Now, what's changed? Well, two things have changed. First of all, the Arab world's changed, as we've discussed. Saudi Arabia is now in a tacit alliance with Israel, whatever it says. The Gulf states similarly following suit. It's not the same thing anymore. The position that Israel has in the Arab world is not the same as it was even just a few years ago. That's the first thing that's changed. Second thing that's changed is the British Prime Minister, Mrs. May. Now, we've had pro-Israel Prime Ministers before. Gordon Brown, Labour Prime Minister, was very, very pro-Israel. Tony Blair was very, very pro-Israel. David Cameron came to be quite pro-Israel, I think. Mrs. May is very pro-Israel and has gone out of her way to be seen to be pro-Israel, and to be pro-Jewish community and so on and so forth. On the other hand, her government has done things which are anti-Israel. For example, it's voted against the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital in the wake of the Trump moving the embassy, and it's voted against Israel over settlements at the UN. So it's kind of going in two directions at once at the moment. Mm-hmm. So the Foreign Office, and this is where the itinerary comes in, the Foreign Office is kind of clinging on to this thing that it has, that, Israel is one thing. Okay, we can all put up with the State of Israel existing. But, they're doing terrible things to the Palestinians. That's the Foreign Office kind of position. They're doing illegal things to the Palestinians. In my view, legally, they're wrong. But that's their view. So they're tenaciously hanging on to that. But the bottom line is, Prince William is coming. This is breaking a 70-year boycott.
Right.
And whatever happens, that is very important. And that is a milestone that the Foreign Office will not have wanted to pass. Now, whether they have just kind of given up, whether they are becoming more realistic, slightly, or whether Mrs. May has simply overruled them, we don't know. But the fact that Prince William is coming at all, very good thing, not to be sneezed at, but we're all going to be looking very carefully at all the body language, smoke signals, where he's going, who he's going with, what he's being told. It's going to be scrutinized very minutely.
And interestingly, just following up on that last point, following other things you've said in the past about Prime Minister May, my inclination is to think it's not because of her pressuring or overruling the Foreign Office, because I hear from you that she's more of a bureaucrat than a leader. So it would sound that it is coming more from the Foreign Office, which in and of itself is also a huge change.
It may be. I mean, even the benighted Foreign Office can't surely fail to have understood that something very big is going on Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states in terms of their attitude to Israel. I mean, you can't fail to see this.
Right.
So maybe it's something around that. I
Okay.
don't know, but it is significant.
All right, well, he's here this week. Hopefully next week we'll have more details of how the trip went.
Well, yes, we will be agog again.
Wonderful. Well, Melanie, thank you so much. Anyone who is not yet following Melanie and getting her direct emails with her updates and articles, go to melaniephillips.com, sign up. You are definitely going to want it. And Melanie, thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Abby, as ever. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening.
Thank you. Have a good week and a great day, everyone. Take care.